Morning, John.
Good morning.
And hello, Ramon.
Hello. Morning.
I assume it's Ramon, not Raymond.
Yes, Ramon. That's correct.
How's everybody doing today?
Great.
Good, thank you, Chris.
Do
How are
darn
you?
well, thank you.
Awesome. Get us started here. I want to go to video.
I'm done. Fill up my coffee.
Well, you got rid of the girl. What's up with that?
Well, we're going to have to deal without it. Oh, there it is. Ha! There we go. Good. All right. Cool. Stop screen. Hey, everybody.
Hello, sir.
We'll go
Good
ahead
morning.
and get started. We're a couple minutes late. We have, let me look at my participants here. We got 10 participants. Looks like we got, if you'll rename yourself so I know where you are in the process, that would be awesome. Just starting the process is Mark, and we got Jack as a liaison. Ramon, hey Ramon, how's it going?
Good,
He
thank
just
you.
shot his Sherman images, getting ready to submit those, so that'll be awesome. So we've got a couple candidates on here. Hopefully a few will join us as well. Today, James is going to go ahead and lead us in a discussion. I think we're going to talk about what did we say, James? Oh, we said
Lighting ratio.
yeah, light ratios. So wow, there's a light ratio on your
Yeah,
face right there, James. So we'll go ahead and let you kick
All right.
it off.
I like it.
And I'm going
Okay.
to put out first things first. I'm going to make sure that we're letting people answer or ask their questions before we get started on on our discussion. So if anybody has a discussion or a question, go ahead and ask.
Question.
Or if you want to type as we get in our discussions, you can type your questions in the chat. I'll be monitoring the chat. Chuck is very graciously, he's always said that he would find any resources for us. So if there's anything that comes up in our discussions, Chuck will put those in the chat as well. So I'll open it up to questions. Anybody have any questions? As the crickets chirp.
Anybody?
No, doesn't sound like it. So I'll turn it over to James. James, if you've got
All right,
want to talk about your presentation here.
Yeah. So basically, I started. What's this? Share. I built this last.
That bridge
I
you
had a
built last
super
night?
busy weekend wedding. Yeah, I had a wedding last. Was it Sunday?
Yeah.
Dude, it was all day. I had to be there from 9 a.m. and we left here at my office at 9 a.m. Then went up to Valley View, which is from my office about a little over an hour drive. We were there till 11 and then drove back. And then by the time I got home, which is another hour drive from my office, I was like 1 or 2 in the morning. And then Sunday worked like crazy. And then I called Chris yesterday late night. Well, let me put something together real quick. So I apologize if I mess up a little bit, but I'll do my best here. Hey. So lighting ratios, basically what you need to know is your f-stops, backwards and forwards. You need to know, and we're going to go with just single stop on the f-stops. If you have any questions, don't be afraid to somebody chime in or put it in the chat so somebody can answer, and you can stop me. I'm just going to keep going until I get all the way through this, I hope. The first lighting ratio we're going to deal with is light 1-to-1. And right here, you can see my little light. Can y'all see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, good. Okay. And so at this one, we're going to measure it and we're going to use our little light meter. Let me see where's my, boom, there it is. The light meter is right here measuring and it says F8. And we're going to be at full power. And if we bring in our second light, and let's imagine also that it is only hitting one side of this person's face. So right here, just imagine it was breakdown, light's hitting over here, and nothing else is hitting on this side of the person's face. So we're at full power, F8 on this side. But then we want to bring in a second light. Okay, so there's our second light. And it is also full power at F8 when I meter for this side. So now, get away the shadow, we're both sides hitting F8 full power. So now we're at a 1-to-1 light ratio. Okay, let's see where that one is. Right there. So each side being totally equal, everything being equal, same exact light, same exact power. We are exactly the same amount of light on either side of the face. So that is a 1-to-1 light ratio. Okay, that makes sense, yes? Now we go to the next one, which is a 2-to-1 lighting ratio. We turn on the first light as we did, check the power, again, same thing, same F8 full power. We kick in our second light, except this time we're going to put one stop. So 5/6 to 1 F8, one sound. We have half the power of this. So we measure it, and our shadow will have a little bit of a shadow, but that is a 2-to lighting ratio on the left side. There's our shadow right there. It's a little, so a 2-to-1 lighting ratio and stop. So it's twice the amount of light, or twice the amount of light on this side as this one, so one stop. Okay. Now we go to our next setup, which is a 4-to-1 lighting ratio. These kinds. We go back to our light. It's at F8, same like first 4. Our second light now, let's see, that's going to be at F4 at a 1/4 power. So now that gives us a 2-to-1 lighting ratio. Okay. And I hope this is making sense, buddy. Now,
Did you mean 2-to-1 or 4-to-1, James?
Oh, 4-to-1. Yeah, 4-to-1. Yeah, 4-to-1 right there. Because we're 2 stops from here, F4 to 5/6, 5/6 to F8. So that's a 4-to-1 lighting ratio. I'm going to explain this a different way here in just a second. So now we're going to light. So our main light, we're going to move it over, and that's going to be dead center, right over camera. So when we light it at F8, both sides of the face now getting F8. So it's full power on both sides of the face. And that is still a 1-to-1 lighting ratio. Okay, because both sides are getting the equal amount of power. Whoops, I mean to move that. Now we're going to move on.
Can I ask one more question just for clarification? Yes. When you say that it's the f-stop and the power, are you saying that you change the f-stop and or the power on the lights?
Yeah, so if we were to take up a light and say we put it all the way up and just whatever light, we're just saying a random light is at F8 when I measure it at my subject. My little light meter right here, when I measure that light at F8, it measures, when I measure the power at 4, it measures it at F8. My second light, like I said, I'll move it over and then I re-meter that light and then I see at full power, it's at F8. I take it down to half power, it's going to be at 5/6 from the, that's where I'm from. John, answer the question.
Well, I was just meaning you're not changing the power on the light. You're only changing the light. I beg your pardon. You're changing the power on the light to effectively give you the f-stop for the correct exposure on the
Exactly. Yep. So we're reducing the power on the second light to give us the ratio difference. Because as you can see right now, I have basically, what is this? Probably about half power in front of me and nothing. That's why I'm so dark on one side. That would be the same thing. So if I were to measure, I'm only having one side of my face lit. So that's the same thing like what we're doing here in these drawings here. So we're having an imaginary line down the person, but now we went to a center lighting setup. So now we go with the center light. Let me see where that is. I think it's about right here. There's turn on the light. That one again is F8 at full power. We're measuring from the subject. There's my little light meter. Power is hitting both sides of his face. So that is at the moment a 1-to-1 ratio. But then I bring in a second light over here to this side, to the right side. Actually, over on the white's there. Let me grab that. Nope, wrong one. So just this side is hitting only this side of the face. And at f8. Okay. That's going to give us a 2-to-1 light. Oh, where am I at? I lost my sight. Full power. So on the other side of the face, they're both at f8. This one's hitting both. This one's at full power. So it's giving us a 2-to-1 lighting ratio. Both f8. Before it was f8 on one side, f8 on the opposite side. It was a 1-to-1. But we now have f8 on both sides. But we have another double the light on this side. So it gives us a 2-to-1 lighting ratio. Now we go to a 3-to-1. And we go with the first light. Same thing, f8, full power. We bring in a second light. Whoops, I'm sorry, I backed it up. There we go. So this one's at f8. This one's at 5-6. It's going to give us a 2-to-1 lighting ratio, 3-to-1 lighting ratio from this side. Is that right? I'm looking at my notes here, trying to see what I'm seeing.
I have a question.
Yeah.
James, real quick, just to clarify, in your diagrams here, the highlight side of the face was going to be camera left, and the shadow side of the face is going to be camera right.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay.
So the light camera left is your main light. The center light is going to be your fill light.
Correct.
Okay.
On this example right here, yeah. Okay. So basically, I'm hitting one stop left.
I think you said earlier on. I think you said the opposite.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I probably did. Sorry about that. But what I learned, Steve Kozak, which taking his classes, that we can do the same thing with quarters. Let me see if I can actually pull these up. It'll make sense to people. I'm going to go back to a 1-to-1 lighting ratio. Center. There we go. Okay. So if we have a 1-to-1 lighting ratio, and we say that at full power, let's just say, no matter what the number is, but at full power, a lighting ratio is going to equal 4/4. And since on here we have 4/4 on both sides, because we said we're dead center, so he's hitting this side with full power and this side with full power. So we have 4/4 on this side, 4/4 on that side, if that makes sense to everybody. Okay. On a 2-to-1 lighting ratio, let me see where that is. I hope this is right. Yeah. If we have the f8 light, where's that one over here? Left center. So hard to find. Sorry, guys. Second light. There it is. So that actually should say 2-to-1. So we have f8 over here that equals 4/4. That's right here. And it's also over here because it's hitting both sides. And then we have an f8 over here, which represents the quarters right here at the top. So now you can see we have twice as many quarters as this side. That's why this is a 2-to-1 lighting ratio, if that makes sense. And we're doing this to break it down. So if you can see the subject, you can see the objects, not just the f8, because f8 and 5/6 to some people doesn't make sense. But if you equate it to something like quarters, now you say, okay, so f8 equals, in a sense, 4/4, or full, which is, in a sense, $1. Over here, we did the same thing because it's hitting both sides. So both sides need to get 4/4. And then we added another 4/4. So it's twice the amount of lights, 2-to-1 lighting ratio, or a stop. Okay. And then if we do, let's see, if we go down, turn this off, go to this one. Let me turn this one off. I'm kind of lost in my little nuggets here. Is it this one? Can't see where that one is. There it is. Okay. So here we are in the next lighting ratio, 3/6. So we have 4/4 for f8, and we have 5/6 that's dead center. Well, that's one stop down from F8. So that's only 2/4. We took away half the amount of light. So it's on the left side, 2/4 on the right side. So we added 2/4 for the F6, 5/6 here, 2/4 for the 5/6 here, and then we added 4/4 for the F8 on this side. So that gives us, on this side, we can see what that represents, the 5/6 and the F8 combined, gives us these 6/4. On this side, it gives us 2/4. That's 3 times the amount of light. So yeah, 3 times. So that is 3-to-1 lighting ratio right here. Okay, that makes sense to everybody?
So another clarification question.
Yeah.
Why does the light, the main light, or the light on the highlight side of the face, why is it that none of the light affects the light on the shadow side of the face?
It does affect the light on the shadow side. Is that what you're asking? It does, because we're saying it's on both sides of the face. The centered light is affecting both because it's cumulative.
No.
So we're adding a wonderful.
What you're telling me right now is the fill light affects both sides of the face. I'm asking why the main light doesn't affect the shadow side.
Oh, does it? I'm saying if this, it's hard to do because it needs to be a block or something where it's only hitting one side. I said imagine there was an imaginary wall where it's only hitting one side of the face.
Right.
So imagine this light is only hitting this side of the face, and imagine this light is hitting both sides.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. And then the last example, let me see where I'm at here. Yeah, here's my imaginary wall right there. Sorry, didn't show that earlier. And then, let me see. I think that's the last one I had. Yeah, 3-to-1 lighting ratio. So, any more questions? Kind of race through that real quick.
I think the tricky part of these questions on like the CPP exam is recognizing the physical situation they're describing. So right off, draw a picture and note, are they telling you the light is behind the camera and one off to the left? Or are they saying one is coming in from the left and the other one coming in from the right? Because that will dictate the math on how the light adds together. So just understanding that geometry is like number one thing to start with in this.
Exactly. So that's what I did on my test is I actually drew out an example like this. And then I put on my piece of paper, I drew it out, and then I put where the light was coming from. So I drew, just like I did here, an umbrella. I put back exposure. And okay, if that light is hitting both sides of its center, or if it's hitting just one side of the face, or whatever the object is, always, but it could be a block, it could be a phone, whatever it is, doesn't matter. But where's the light coming from is exactly striking the subject. And then that's where our reading is.
Has anyone who's taken the test, and this could be liaison or CPP candidate that's already taken the test or anywhere in between, has anyone that's taken the test ever run into a situation where they do anything but cumulative light ratios? I'm pretty sure that they only talk about cumulative light ratios on the test.
Yeah, I mean,
Right.
you only see 1/3 of the questions in any given exam, but I would be prepared to understand how to manage both. If not for the test, then because you're going to have to use that out in the field in real life,
Yeah, my
Exactly.
recollection is everything was the cumulative light because all the questions dealt with apertures and everything, full stops only. They didn't do any half stops or third stops. And in order to get an odd lighting ratio other than 1-to-1, to get a 3-to-1, 5-to-1, without using cumulative light, you have to use half stops. And the test doesn't use any half stops. If you were to have them the way he had the original set up with one camera left, one camera right, to get a 3-to-1 ratio, you have to use a half stop. You have to use half.
Exactly. Right. But you have to know, like you said, out in the field, we have to know this because I use it a lot for weddings because you have, and then with this light, and then you can have a lot of shadow. You know how much light you need to put in there to fill that shadow to get it the right ratio you want. And stop sharing. Is there more questions on this? There we go.
Nice. Thank you, Guy Phillips. Guy just put in the chat the references for both London and Upton and Chris Duncan's study guide. And he also put in there for Steve Kozak. So that's awesome.
Thanks, James, for your presentation. Thank you. Very good.
Yeah, for me, it made it a lot easier through the quarter system for when Steve explained that, made that connected for me. I understood the numbers and I did that. Like I said, when I did it on the test, I actually drew it out like I just showed you guys physically on the test. And then I wrote down all my f-stops and then figured out which one to go by assigning quarters to those f-stops. And then that way, because I believe there was one question where there was center light and a left light. That was the only one question on the test, but I I can't remember. I think I scored like a 92 on the test, something like that. But
so
any other questions?
The other place you can use a kind of an equation is if anybody in here is a cook, you can think of lighting as a equal parts or parts of an ingredient. When I'm explaining, I typically use vinegar and oil as, if I'm making a salad dressing, 2 parts of vinegar on my fill or on my main light side and 1 part vinegar or oil on the fill light side, or highlight and shadow. I got to get out of that terminology. So any questions?
Can I make a quick comment?
Please do.
What you've been running across, by the way, those of you who are using more contemporary equipment, you may notice that it doesn't do full power, half power, quarter power, etc. Looks like more and more brands are going to the simplification of 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, where they should be equivalent one-stop differences. So if you have a Pro Photo, which has been doing it for years, and some of the others who have gone to that, such as Westcott and some of the others, when you look at your lights and you go from 10 to 9, how much did you cut the power?
10%, which would be...
Nope. Not quite where I'm going. Nothing personal, Chris, but if I had a conventional light and it went from full power to half power, if I have a Pro Photo or some of these others have gone to the 10, 9, 7, 6, etc., how much does it go from, when I go from 10 to 9, how much power did I cut? Sorry, I probably didn't answer the question right first time.
Some of us work with different equipment, so I don't have the luxury of working with Pro Photos, so I don't know how much that cuts it. Does it cut it in half?
Yes, that's their equivalent. So again, you'll see a lot of new equipment. Westcott and I'll just name a popper. Godox has gone to it as well. So when you're looking at your stuff and you can't see where it goes from full power to half power to quarter power, etc., well, you're really doing that, but you got to start at the top, right? So 10 to 9, you've cut it in half. To 8, you've cut it in a quarter, etc. And you'll see them that they'll be rated 9 stop or 7 stop, etc. So you might have only from 10 to 3 on some brands. You might have 10 to 1 on another brand, 10 to 0 on another brand. Just depends. But more and more manufacturers seem to be getting away from the 1 to 1, 1/2, 1/4, 1/8.
Guy, my Godox lights, they work the same way James is describing. I don't see that.
Yeah, mine's the same.
If you have a new AD,
which lights do you know?
Yep, Godox AD 400, 600s, etc. on some of the newer with the newer screens, and like I said, on a Westcott FJ 400, which the guts are the same. But
all right, I have the 8200 Pro, and that's the old way, I guess.
Yeah.
All right.
And like I said, not all models, not all brands, but Westcott, when they introduced their FJ 400 series, they migrated towards that same thing that, again, Pro Photo's been doing for years. But, Pro Photo, you got to sell a couple of kidneys just to get one, right?
I'm going to pick up some more lights, so keep that in mind. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the important thing in what you're saying, Guy T, is get to know your equipment. You can't just take it out there and start using it, I know my Paul Buff stuff like the back of my hand, and I know it's similar to what you're saying about the Pro Photo, but it only has, depending on the number of stops the light has to work with, from full power to half power. My White Lightning's only 6 stops, and my Digibees are 7 stops. It breaks it down in equivalent proportions per click. I don't
Right.
know how to explain.
Yeah, and they still have a nice feature that gives you the watt seconds as you drop as well, which most brands have gotten away
Right.
from that. Sure would be nice if all the brands also told you, when I drop to 5, what watt second is that? But that'd be too easy.
Right. Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
I had a point just to clarify for the students, James. If you would speak about which way your light meter is pointing in your diagram, it pointing.
Yeah.
to the
So
camera.
basically, do light meters directly from the subject pointing directly to the source, which would be the light measuring. And then let's say if I had 2, I would turn off one and then measure the other one. And that would give me my equivalent. So if I measured F8, turned it off, measured the next one, and it was F both on, then I would have 2 light, which is 1 stop. So now we have F that I would want to set my light to. If they're both from the center or from the section, if they're heading from each side, F8 over here and F8 over here, and they're both only hitting one side, F8 would be my light, or would be my meter reading. Let's just say, for instance, the light is not spilling over into the opposite side.
My question was really which way you're pointing the dome of your light meter. In your picture, it had it pointing right at the camera. So you're not pointing it.
Yeah,
towards
it's
the camera, you're
directly
pointing
at
it
the light from the subject. I usually measure right from the chin and under, directly at the light source that's hitting the subject. And I use a light meter pretty much every day I'm out in the field.
That's a good
Easier.
point, John. I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
Thanks for explaining that, James.
Hey,
so
and we see, yeah.
So Deb Davis, it looks like posted a question from the practice test. The main light is placed 45 degrees from the subject, and the fill and is set to f8. The fill light is placed behind the camera. How will it need to be set to create a 3-to-1 ratio on the subject? And the answers that we can discuss are f8, f5.6, f4, or f2.8.
What do you think the answer is, Miss Deb?
This is a great example where they tell you where your lights are located. So draw your pictures so that you can figure out how to add together.
Have any discussion?
Well, my F doesn't stop, so I don't know the answer.
We should make a point on this too, that although it doesn't say it in this question, it's assuming the lights are the same. I guess no, I take that back. I'm wrong. It doesn't matter because you're measuring it at the subject. Never mind, guys.
Yep, because f8 is the same f8 as it would at 5 feet as it would be at 10 feet.
Yeah, I was going to say that's another curve they can throw in there is by adjusting the distance so you are away from the subjects. And if you talk about the strobe light itself, the intensity of the strobe light itself, that will affect it. But if you're measuring at the subject, it doesn't matter the distance away. So that's a good thing to keep in mind.
So Deb, I know you haven't taken the test yet. Go ahead and talk it through with us.
Okay.
What do you think?
So I guess I'm trying to, so if it's so the main light is placed at a 45-degree angle. Okay, and it's set at f8. And the field light is placed behind the camera.
So that tells you two things you're looking at. If it's at a 45-degree angle, the f8 light, we're assuming it's hitting one side or both.
One side.
Okay. The other one is directly behind the camera, so it's hitting what? One side or both sides? Directly behind the camera.
Directly behind the camera, one side.
No.
Wait,
Think about
hold
it.
on, hold
If
on.
it's directly behind the
Okay.
camera.
Directly behind the camera.
Like the
Let's
camera
see.
is right here, right there.
Camera's
If
right
I'm hitting
here.
the lights hitting,
Oh, okay. Okay, okay. Both sides.
there you go.
45
Both sides.
right in front.
Yeah.
Okay. So now walk through the rest of it.
Okay. So let's see, F8, and then it's behind the camera, hitting both sides. Then how will it need to be set to create a 3-to-1 ratio?
So if we go back to, like I was saying, imagine there's quarters. If 8 represented 4 quarters. If we have 8 hitting one side,
Mm-hmm.
draw that.
Right.
It's only hitting one side. And then you have, let's go with the first one, F8 hitting both. What does that give you?
Both sides. That's
So
giving me 8 quarters.
Okay. And then side and 4 quarters on the other side. What is that one?
You cut out, James. What you say?
Oh, you have 4 quarters on one side, and then you have 8 quarters on the other one. What does that give you? What's the ratio right there? How many more quarters on the one side to the other?
Twice as much. So that's a 2-to-1 ratio.
Exactly. Exactly. There you go.
Okay.
So now next one.
So that's a
5,
2-to-1.
6 gives
What you say,
how
James?
many quarters? 5, 6, how many quarters? Because we're down one stop.
Okay.
So count how many quarters in half a stop.
Hold on, you're losing me there. Okay.
So we've
Okay, so I
reduced
got the 2-to-1.
Right. You were correct on that one.
Okay.
So let's look at 5, 6. 5, 6 is one stop down, or half the amount of power.
Okay. So 5, 6 is half of the amount of power. And so 5, 6 would be 6 quarters.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
6 quarters.
Well, yeah, 5, 6 would be 2 quarters from the 5, 6, 2 quarters. And then you have the F8 that has, right?
Right. Hold on. Hold on. The 5, 6 would be, so if it's
half the amount of light.
Hold on. Half of the amount of light, half of the 5.
Half of 8.
Half of the
8, right?
Yes.
Half of 8. Okay. So that would be a total of, well, that would be 2 quarters, right?
Correct.
For the 5, 6. And then we got the 4 quarters for the 5, 8. So that would be 6. So that's giving me, okay.
You're there.
I think that's where I'm getting lost.
Yep. So
you had it right. You had your math right.
So on the highlight side of the face, you're getting, or let's just say highlight side of the subject. It doesn't have to be a face. Highlight side of the subject, you're getting how many quarters?
That would be on the highlight side of the face. That would be the F8, right?
Yep.
Which would be 4 quarters.
No.
Hold on.
Because you added in 2 quarters from your fill light, so it's
6.
Yep.
There you go.
But you still have.
So just like.
Okay, explain that for me.
You still have some light coming
I'll show you.
The shadow side of your subject.
Okay.
Which is
how many we're all breaking up. It was like.
Yeah, you are breaking up a little bit, James.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris. I'm in trouble on mine.
I said you have. I'm sorry. I just noticed my mic got messed up. You still have some light falling on the shadow side of your subject, So how many quarters is falling on your shadow side of your subject?
That's where I think I'm getting mixed up at. So
Yeah,
when you
you are. I can
say,
see you've kind of
yeah,
you've forgotten that shadow side of the face. So you just need to remember how many of those quarters are still falling on the shadow side of the face.
oh, okay,
You stopped at part of the equation.
right. So how many quarters would be still falling on the
Shadow
shadow
side.
side of the face would be 6, right?
Nope. You only have 5, 6.
Oh, okay, I went back to 5'8". Okay, so I'm on 5'8" when okay, that's where I'm having a problem with the ratios.
Your
um,
fill light, your main light,
trying to
your main light, the F8, that's 4 quarters, right?
right.
Where does it put those 4 quarters? Shadow side or highlight side?
That is, well, according to the question, okay, that's 45 degree from the subject's. That is
So where is it going to put those 4 quarters?
on the shadow side. All
Try
right.
again.
Well,
Okay, here's my 4 quarters, 45-degree angle. What side is that light hitting? The highlight side or the shadow side of my face?
hold on 1 second. Let me
No,
draw
just look at my
something.
face here.
Okay.
Look at the screen. There you go.
This
Oh, the
light,
highlight. Okay, the highlight side.
so I just put 4 quarters on my highlight side, right? Okay, so those 4 quarters are there. They're not going anywhere. Keep those in mind. Now, right in front of me is the light that's behind the camera.
Mm-hmm.
How many quarters is it putting there? Because it's at half power.
2.
It's putting 2. What side of my face is it putting it on?
That's both sides of your face.
Both sides. So
There you go.
2 quarters to both sides, right? How many
Right.
quarters did you have on the highlight side?
4,
And you just put 2 more quarters there. So how many do you have?
6,
Okay. How many did you put on the shadow side?
I didn't put any on the shadow side. Well, it had already had 4. Oh,
Where's it hitting?
That's right there.
Which
okay.
side of my face?
Both sides. I put 4.
Nope.
It's half power.
Put 2.
5, 6.
Wait a minute. Hold on.
You added
Put it back
2
to you.
to the highlight side.
Let me go to. Let me see if I can pull up my
You have to add
example.
2 to the shadow side because
2.
this light's hitting both sides.
Okay.
How many now on the highlight side?
2. This is the highlight side. And I'll put 2.
We started with 4 and added 2.
At 6.
All right, now, how many do we have on the shadow side now? We started with none and added 2.
So did you take those 2 from the shadow side? Or you still have those 2?
We still have those 2.
You still have those 2. So it's 2.
6 on the highlight, 2 on the shadow, right?
Right.
What is the ratio between the highlight and the shadow now? Divide that 6 by the 2. What do you get?
3 to 1.
3 to 1. That's how you get it. You add the quarters. Remember, the light behind the camera is going to add the same amount to both sides. The one at a 45-degree angle, it's only going to add to one side.
One side.
The one right behind the camera is adding to both sides. So you take
Okay.
you take whatever the main light is adding, however many quarters, you can do it quarters, you can do it cups of flour, however you can keep track of it. But you're adding so much to the highlight side only from your main light. And then you're adding another amount from the fill light, which is behind the camera, to both sides. And so you have to add to the shadow side or the highlight side, and then whatever it is to the shadow side.
Okay.
How much have I confused you?
I think I'm kind of following you. So,
You got it.
so that answer would be B at 5.6 to
What
as far as
ratio
the
are we
question.
looking for?
Well, we're
Going back
looking
to
for
the
a 3 to
question.
1.
We're looking for a 3 to 1. And what did you just figure you had when you put it the fill light at 5.6?
3 to 1.
There you go.
So which is going to be the correct answer?
3 to 1 at 5.6.
You need to check the other two now. Is there any reason?
Oh,
Is there any reason to check those other two?
but okay. So when James, he automatically went to 5.6. So I guess I'm trying to figure out because basically
And then 5.6.
No, he
Yeah.
started with F8 at
we
both
started
sides.
with F8.
He started with answer A and then went to answer B. Now you've just found
Oh,
out
I see.
answer B
Okay.
gives you the 3 to 1 ratio. Is there any reason to check answer C and answer D? Because I'm trying to
No,
think.
not if I got the 3 to 1 ratio.
There you go.
If I got the answer right there, I wouldn't have to go any further. So
that's
what you did, let me just make sure. So what you did was you started with, okay, so the main light is placed at 45-degree angle and they gave us that at F8. So that's where you started. And then you went and placed the field light behind the camera. And then
Correct.
when you said with the field light being behind the camera, I needed to understand that it was shining on both sides.
Correct.
So, so that's how I figured it out from there. And then I would go through figuring out each one of the A, B, C, D and see which one would fit the 3 to 1 ratio.
And then
Yes.
Exactly. Did
right
F8 on both of them.
you stop calculating.
Okay, got it. Okay. I'm gonna go back. Chris, this is being recorded, right? Okay. Yeah, I need to go back and keep it. I think I got it.
I think you got. I was saying F8 because F8 was question A.
That
the
was
answer.
the A. Got
Yeah,
it.
that was. And then you went to B, and then I think you were still stuck in your head on F8.
Yes, I was. Okay, that's what it was. Because I was thinking, well, because I was stuck with the main light being set at F8. Okay. I think I got it. I'll go back. Thank you.
A couple of notes here that Guy T put in the chat. It's important to note, perhaps, that this two lights, one at 90 degrees and left and one behind the camera, is very similar to what you would work with when you're doing your technical image submission.
Okay.
And you measure one light at a time as instructed in the text and Jamie Hayes videos. So those of you who have gotten there also, Jamie Hayes in his videos blocks the light, and some of us have learned to meter one light at a time by turning a light off or turning a light around if you didn't have that luxury with old pack style flashes, or you've got a whole bunch of different ways that you can, but the key is that you're only metering the main light and you're only metering the fill light individually. Mia says that 3 to 1 light ratio is the most common and most flattering light ratio for portraits. For portrait headshots, I would agree. Some creative portraits will be a little bit have a little bit higher ratio, maybe a 4 to 1. And kind of depends on the drama that you're looking for, and also how many lights you're working with. I mean, I just sat through and watched a Joel Grimes video, and he works with 3 lights and 3. You have 2 highlights, and a flat front that's in a lower light ratio than the 2 highlight sides. So I mean, there's all kinds of different creative lightings that you can use, and some that will do better in competition. I mean, some of you guys will start to get excited about competition after you get your CPP, because that's going to be your next step. You're going to want to do your masters, and sometimes a more dramatic lighting ratio will do better in competition than a flat lit subject. But overall, Mia is correct. For headshots, for websites, that type of thing, a flatter light ratio, a 3-to-1 light ratio sells very well, and that's what they're looking for.
I asked in the chat, but I think you may have missed it, Chris. Would you like to see what it looks like? What James was showing, what photography book shows?
Yes, please.
Okay.
I didn't see that. Sorry, I didn't
All right.
see it.
Chat ran past you. Okay, here's how they show that same example. You guys see that?
Yes.
We do know.
Yes.
Okay. So that one gentleman there, as you keep going down, it goes from 1-to-1, 2-to-1, 4-to-1, 8-to-1. Does not have a 3-to-1 example, but that may be of help. I don't know. Let me see. Yeah, that was the only page. If you want, I can bounce over to Chris Duncan's or to Kozak's. But that's what it looks like in that book. That is super, super inexpensive, right, Chuck?
Yes. And if you look under the 4-to-1 ratio, it tells you about a 3-to-1 ratio, but it doesn't show a picture of it.
Does this say anywhere? I'm trying to read the page while we're here. What the I'm trying to find if they've got a diagram of the lights, where their lights are. I'm looking
That would be a Kozak example. Would that work for you?
Huh? Well, no, I'm just trying to see in this example without having to change it.
Okay.
No, it doesn't show you how to set your lights to get the different ratios, because there are a number of different ways you can do it. You can have both at 45-degree angles. You can have one behind camera. It just tells you.
Right.
A 2-to-1 ratio has twice as much light on one side as the other.
Correct.
Is that what you were talking about, Chris?
Huh? No. Well, it is kind of. Can we go back to the book for just a second? There is something I want to point out. So if we look at the pictures here, there's not a diagram anywhere here, and they don't talk about it. But if we look at the pictures, you can look at the catch lights, especially into 1-to-1. Look at the catch lights in his face, or in his eyes. I can see that the main light side, especially on the 1-to-1, I can see that catch light is off center and to the left. I can look at the catch light on that same eye, and I'm betting that my fill light is off the center of the subject. I was looking at the other eye guy too.
Yeah, you can see it
if
in
you
both.
look at the second catch light on the right side of the eye, that's what would lead me to believe that the lighting is a 45-degree for my key light, and my fill light is probably not quite a 45-degree, probably, but it's not a 90-degree. It's not right off behind the camera either. It's typical underclass lighting, put it that way.
So I often think about that as well, as you talking degrees, and some people get really confused in degrees. So you think of it as your subject is you're in a clock, and your subject is where the hands are in the center where they connect, and you're at 6 o'clock, and you put your light, your camera is at 6, your fill is at 6, and then you're moving your main either right and left. You could be at, 7 o'clock or 5 o'clock or 8 o'clock, at 9 o'clock. You're really getting into that drama down there and split lighting. And so I think it is in terms as a clock, because when you start adding light, for instance, if you want to add a strip bank in the back, then you're going to put that maybe at 1 o'clock to 1.5, almost 2. You're going to be moving that around. And if you think when you're looking at the scene, whether it's outside or anywhere, just imagine that clock and where your lights go. And it's easier sometimes to think in those terms as opposed to 45 degrees or whatever. It's just a different way to approach the same subject.
Correct. Now, why is what I just pointed out important? Because you're actually not in the same scenario that we were just in. The shadow side lighting is coming 90% from, well, it's coming from the fill light. There's not much of that same light being dumped, as much being dumped on the highlight side.
In other words, you're saying their light is not directly behind camera like James's example.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. So if a 2-to-1 light ratio, the way that we just showed it, the way James did it, I don't believe is going to be as much shadow as what's shown here. So if we're trying to use this as an example of what a true 2-to-1 light ratio is, or not, I'm sorry, I don't want to mislead you. A 2-to-1 light ratio, the way that we just explained it, is going to have less contrast.
I think
here's what James was explaining.
Exactly.
The Kozak way.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay. But in that particular case, they are both 45. Now, if I'm not mistaken, he also moves them and shows you more specifics as if they were indeed behind camera. So if you go through those few pages, you should have good examples of what if it's behind the example, right? And James, I don't remember your specific numbers you were running, but some of these were exactly what James. Yeah.
Yep.
Those are.
That's the
Yeah, there's
one.
that 3
That's
to 1.
how yeah, that's the study guide that I've been using, and it seemed to explain it a lot easier, although it's still confusing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But
what Chris was saying, this one is
more
not behind camera.
Yeah.
Right? Kozak's guide, yes. The other one, no.
See, Deb, on that image, can you hold that image right there on the screen? You have to kind of imagine, if you're, I know you tend to shoot humans, so you have to imagine that line, say at the corner of the box is their nose. Mm-hmm. And so you're looking at that. You've got one eye on one side, one eye on the other. You just kind of got to get into that creative mode just a bit and mix. Mm-hmm. And mix that measuring cup, or whatever it works for you, into what are you seeing? Where's that shadow falling? Because that will come into play later when you're talking about Rembrandt and things like that, which are extremely important.
And definitely when you do
group lighting,
definitely
and butterfly lighting and such, it really just bleeds right into how that comes into play.
And you can't get the odd lighting ratios without using fractional stops if you have your main and fill at 45-degree angles to the subject. And that's why Steve Kozak's book, and most likely what we were being shown by James, is to get that 3-to-1 ratio without using fractional stops. You have to use the cumulative lighting.
Notice how that says 9.5, not F8.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Right, Chuck?
Right.
The light may have been at F8, but once you added the secondary light, the subject jumps to 9.5 because of the cumulative. Is that where you were going, Chuck?
Yeah, you added more light. And
you want to meter that, you put your lights there, so you go to your subject, you meter and then it ends up to 9.5.
Yeah, and if you were to actually, if you measured the lights one at a time, you would measure the main light at f8, then you would measure the fill light at f5.6, and then you turn them both on,
And measure
and
your
you would
subject.
measure the highlight side at 9.5 and the shadow side at the 5.6, just like it's showing there.
And if it doesn't make sense, grab a shoebox and 2 lights and
For
your
sure.
meter, and just play with it and see what that meter tells you, because you will find it that way. You will see it and it'll really start making sense.
And you should have some boxes from stuff you've ordered from Amazon. Everybody does.
Yeah, it really, it's a trick, but it works. It's another way, again, to kind of feed that information and put it into that creative side that you need to know. Because you're working on the techie side and you're trying to grab those numbers, but you're a creative and you're like, okay, I got to see it. That part of your brain has to, you have to map the numbers and the information, techie information, with what your brain can see and process. And you got to, don't dump too much on one side or you're going to get lost on the other. So grab a shoebox
And that's
or
what
something.
that's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to see it.
Grab a shoebox, put it on that white table you got back there and give it a go and see what happens. Because you will find that these, based on what the videos tell you in all of these books, if you're doing your full power and setting those lights the way they say, you're going to see these exact same results.
And Deb, I believe you mentioned you have
Mhm.
Kozak's guide, right?
I do. Yeah.
Go through every one of those, page 74 to 77, go through each one of them one at a time. And you may want to call the utility company because you're going to need more electricity because a light bulb's going to be really, really bright.
But
Okay,
you know,
the light bulb will go off.
I don't know if you tether
You
in, but you know, if you tether in or whatever, pull it up on your computer where you see it, because now you're used to seeing it that way. I tethered, so I could see it that way because I'm also tethering with my clients and stuff, and I'm trying to map my mind to always see the things that I need to see and be able to zoom in on and understand. And that's how I got through it.
So the easiest way for me is to understand it first and then perform it, if that makes sense. So I need to understand like how we were walking through it. I need to visualize it in my mind and understand.
Do you have constant
See it
lights
like
or
I see that
modeling lights?
diagram.
A lot of times the understanding will come in when you do it as you're trying to understand. Except if you get
But
your
the problem I'm having is I don't know how to do it. Well, I won't say I don't know how to do it. I guess I don't understand how to do it until I understand it first.
Okay.
I guess.
Here's one thing you could do,
Get your
Deb.
box and that table and your lights, and you set up everything the same way Steve has it set up.
In his videos,
Okay.
too, follow the video.
Yeah.
And see what the result you get is.
When you see it wrong, you'll never forget it's wrong. I'll tell you. It's like, whoa, don't do that.
By the way, Deb, if you're ever in Steve's class, he will do this using constant light because it's much, much easier to grasp. So if you have constant lights or modeling lights on your flash, use those first. If you're trying to do it using flash, it's not quite as obvious. You have to wait for a result, so to speak. But if you got your constant lights or your modeling lights being used, it's going to be very obvious as you do it.
Yeah, I use my Einstein.
I got constant lights.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Deb, I think actually the reason why you think you need to know it first before you do it is maybe you're afraid to do it wrong, but doing it wrong helps you understand how to do it right because it shows you what you're actually doing. So I would challenge you to actually do it, and then that will help your understanding.
Do you have a light meter, Deb?
And that's why, yes, I got to get out of that thinking because I'm technical first. And my brain works like I need to understand it before I do it, but I got to get out of that, especially when it comes to this.
So next time, come back and tell us. Next time, come back and tell us that you tried it and what you found.
Okay.
Another thing you can do, Deb, doesn't matter if you're using constant lights or flash. If you were to build a lighting scenario. And what that means is I'm going to set my main light up, and then I'm going to meter it, and then I'm going to set my fill light up, and I'm going to meter it. But in between each, take a picture. So you're going to be able to see what your fill light is doing. You don't change it. When you do that, what you do is you set your exposure to your main light, to whatever your main light is set at in your camera, and then you can view what your fill light is doing with your main light off. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if I set my main light up, I meter it, it's going to be f8 at with constant lights, f8 at 1/125th of a second, and I'm using probably ISO 400. So that's what I set my camera up at. I take a picture of my subject. I see what that looks like. I see the harsh shadow on one side, and I'm seeing a real highlight on the other. Then I turn that off, and I'll set up my fill light. And let's say that I wanted to use a 3-to-1 light ratio.
Fill light behind the camera, right?
You could do that. Yes.
Okay.
If I'm going to do a 3-to-1 light ratio, that says my fill light is at 5.6. I can meter for 5.6, and then without them turning on the main light yet, take a picture of the fill light. See what that does. You're going to be underexposed, but the whole face should be pretty exposed. It should have some exposure on it. Yes.
You see right here, this is the main light. It's only, you're seeing half. I'm going to switch this to half power, if it'll let me. Come on. I've done this before. And now there's my fill light.
Okay.
It's just getting, it's getting both sides of my face. You can't tell, it's not fill light here, fill light there. It's fill light right in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And like Chris was saying, you set up your main light, take a picture, and see how much the dividing line is between highlight and shadow. And I'm trying to do. Then you'd set up your fill light with only the fill light, and then take a picture. And then you turn both on, and you take a picture. And you compare all three, and try different settings on your fill light.
Try to do the math beforehand on what a 4-to-1 ratio is, or a 5-to-1, and then look at those differences are. We don't always learn when we're out on the job. I'll come over and model for you. We can play around. I'll come over and model for you. Might be a little scary. Hopefully I won't break your camera.
No, you won't be scared. Yeah. It's making a lot more sense. I just got to do it and practice it.
And
if you see it, when you see it and you're doing it with, how you're going to be doing out in the field with clients, it's just going to, you're mapping second nature. You're looking at it. When Chuck was showing how it looked like on his face on the front. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. Isn't that cute? You could tell that the shadows were more towards his ears and down on the edges of his face. And he was masked. He's evenly lit in the mask of his face. And you have to kind of do two things at once. You're looking and you're imagining a human. You're looking and you're imagining a human. And a box will do wonders. It's crazy. I'm glad that there's nice flat surfaces to see that light, because you can really see it.
Yeah, I think the box will work.
Yeah, and plus, a lot of times it's hard grasping the concept that the lights add to each other. Because I can see that right here. I just added another light showing on my face.
And you can see on the camera well, looking at him, it would be camera right. It's very shadowed, and the other side is highlighted more towards his ear. The drama is starting to come in, and you got butterfly lighting going on up there.
So I just switched my view over to gallery view and just noticed that we had a new person in. Elena, hi. I noticed you're working on your images. Do you have any questions? Because this is all very important stuff to your images, and I just want to make sure that we're not confusing the issue, or if we have confused you, do we need to clear anything up?
It's Atlanta, like banana, and I'm doing natural light because I don't have any. I just have a off-camera flash speed light. So I've been working on the natural light using the north-facing window, and I'm learning how. This is all new to me. Learning how to use a light meter, and today I was practicing, and I did like the main was like f13. My ISO was 800 and the shutter speed was 10. And I know you're supposed to have one stop less on the reflector side, or measuring it from the reflector, one stop less. So when I did it from the reflector side, my f stop was at 13, ISO was 800, and my shutter speed was 2. So I'm wondering, how do I get?
Because I didn't write any of that down, I'm going to ask you to clarify that.
Okay.
So your main light side or your window side was what?
F13, ISO 800, and my shutter speed was 10.
Okay.
1/10, And then the using a white reflector, f13, ISO 800, the shutter speed was 2.
So a half a second or 2 seconds?
Half a second.
Okay.
Yeah, 1/2.
Okay.
And
I think the first thing to remember is I don't think the settings change from strobes to your sorry, I'm writing as I'm talking. Guys, in multitasking, we don't do that very well or at all.
Yeah, the 3 images, well, no matter what kind of lighting you're using, one's at f13, one's at f5.6, and one's at f16.
Right.
That doesn't change.
But you're still, even the other thing is, if you're just starting out your metering, your main light still needs to be f11, not 13. Am I correct in that?
As far as I know, yes. And that you can get that, because the thing is, with your meter, with your light meter, depending on what you set the shutter speed and ISO, you can make it say f11 on that natural light.
Well, I thought it was supposed to be like f13.
No, that's your app.
That's on, right. So that is for one of your images for your minimum depth of field. But when you're doing your metering,
okay,
when you're first starting out, when you're first setting up, your window light coming in needs to be f11.
Oh, okay.
And then your reflector side needs to be 1.5 stops less than your main light side.
Okay.
I'm like, right now, if I want to get my meter here to tell me that my light is f11 right now, I got my main light over here. Let's see, I'm going to adjust my ISO. Wrong way. Well, I was going right. With the dim light in this room, okay. Now, if I have my ISO, and hopefully you would never do it in this dim of light. My ISO is at 8,000. My shutter speed is at 1/90th of a second. Now I have an exposure for F11.
Okay.
And then, because this thing, you know, we call this a light meter, but it's actually an exposure meter. It tells you what your exposure is going to be. With this light, if I want to have an F11 exposure, I have to set my ISO up to 8,000 and my shutter speed down to 90. Or I could go with a lower shutter speed and then a lower, or 45 and 5,000. I don't know if you can see it there.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what you have to get to start out with,
Okay.
to figure out what, and then from there, you go to take your pictures. One has to be at f13, which means you're going to have to make camera adjustments with ISO and shutter speed.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got one at f5.6 and then one at f16.
So where did it come? Where does it say F11?
F11 is when you're initially set. To be honest, I'm going to have to go and look at the setup for the natural light, but I can tell you, natural light is by far the most difficult to do. It can be done, but it is the most difficult. If you know anybody nearby that has some strobes you could borrow, I would borrow them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying, yeah, don't go out and buy strobes just for this, but
or even one of your speed lights. If you have someone else that has a speed light, you can do it with speed lights.
Okay.
But I will also interject to Chuck. Yes, I understand it is it's not easy, but I did a review for somebody, and they did natural light, and they did it pretty well. Some of the things that you're going to have to work with, Alana, is you're going to have to make sure that you have some sort of negative fill available to you, like a black fill card, or you may need to kick a smaller fill card in to kick into your shadows, but you need to get your overall fill right, and then it's harder to control, and you're controlling the light with in different parts of your scene individually. In other words, you may have to do a separate fill card for, like, the marker in the front of the ball. You may have to do a separate fill card for that by itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it like Chuck's saying, it is a little more difficult, but there's more details that you pay attention to that you may have full control over that.
Okay.
Yeah, they say it's not impossible to do. It's doable. A lot of people have done it, but it is the most difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as F11, I just re-looked at the whole setup for natural light, and it doesn't mention F11 for the natural light, only for the continuous and the strobes. So for the natural light, it's just make sure you've got the F13, F5.6, and F16 main at the camera left, and a reflector card or a black card, depending on which you need. I just reviewed one where the candidate used a silver reflector.
Okay.
When that candidate probably should have used a black card instead, because the light was even all the way across. You couldn't tell anything about the direction of light.
Right, and that's why I'm wondering, they don't give you any type of lighting ratio requirement?
Nope. I'm just looking it
Well,
up.
heck, I would have done natural light then, because it's good. If I don't have to do a dang lighting ratio, I'd have just set it up in front of the window and said, "Here's my, here's my setup."
As long as it looks like the sample images, and it checks out and with your histogram and your values, right?
Well, that's true. That's where your lighting ratio comes in, is the value.
So if you can do that, go ahead.
You still have to get the highlights, midtones, and shadows within the same range as you do with the strobe. And you still have to be able to show the direction of light.
Well, and that was one thing that I noticed on the evaluation that I did. There wasn't a direction of light per se from the fill light. You could tell the direction of light from the main light from the window, but there was no, like when we do our strobes or continuous light, there's always some sort of direction of light from the fill.
Yeah, a slight one, yes. And it's
And
a
there
little
wasn't
bit,
on the existing light or natural light.
and that would depend on where the candidate had the
Right.
the reflector. Because
so
the reflector
I-
does, goes wherever it needs to go to give you the ratios that you need.
Right.
To give
As
you-
you can tell, Alana, we as liaisons, we really love the natural light scenario.
I make a comment too. There's a product called Cinefoil. If you've ever done any video work, and you can black out windows with that. So that's something that, if you want to shape the light in your shooting space, you can think about that.
Okay.
So check that out. It's just a black aluminum foil. They use it.
Also, the one thing we discussed before is the ideal window as far as where your light should be coming in from your main light would be a southern exposure, because you're going to, a northern exposure, depending on the time of day, the light's going to be a lot harsher. Where a southern exposure, you have a better chance of being a little more even.
Okay.
Yeah. And you got to choose your time of day and, kind of weather going on outside. Things like that might make a difference.
Yeah, if you do one on a cloudy day and one on a sunny day.
Yeah, right. I agree with Chuck. You try to do it all at once, all three images, just bang them out,
Right.
Or get a piece of wax paper and put over the window.
There you go.
That will give you more diffused light, whether it's a sunny day or a cloudy day.
Okay.
Which I say wax paper because I'm way too cheap to go out and buy vellum.
Yeah, I'm a retired teacher. I'm fixed income.
Go. Thanks, everybody. I got to go.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Steve.
Thank
We'll
you.
Thank you, James. Great presentation, sir.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Whoops. Sorry, John. I'm trying to respond to your message.
No rush. I didn't know if that was a question for Thursday.
So, all right. So we're well into overtime. And Ramon, did you have any questions? I know that you are real close. We need to set up a time so we can review your images.
No, no questions at the moment.
Okay.
Just
Yeah, I
answer
think
some
you're pretty well set. It's good that you sat in. I'm glad you did. So.
Yeah, and the light ratios
Recognize that
actually
image
come
behind
up
you, too.
come up as well on the technical image evaluation, since you have to work with 1.5 stops for when you do strobes. And I was looking at the requirement for natural light. It's only 1 stop less for natural light. So I think it kind of makes sense, since you kind of control how much sun you can get in a particular day. They don't ask you to meter f11 when you get natural light, but you still have to meet the other requirements and play with the blockers, reflectors to get the one stop less on the child side. So yeah, it's been interesting. I think it helped me, similar to what I went through when I was setting it up, trying to make sure that I got the main and the field with the different ratios.
Right now, I'm looking at the sample images for natural light, and there is very, very little shadow from the fill light. Not a whole lot of shadow from the main light, just enough that you can tell that the window they used for their natural light was to camera left.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to be an issue if they don't have a lot of shadow behind Sherman from the
Right.
off to the side from the fill light, from the reflector.
Right. I think it's like you mentioned, it's going to fall more into having
Right, man.
your having your values when you read it through Adobe Camera Raw correct more than it is going to fall on a lighting ratio.
Right.
And that's not easy. We were talking about that. I mean, this candidate had everything exactly right in her highlights and in her midtones, but her shadows fell out of range, and you have to, in that case, you have to kick some sort of fill in that only affects the shadow area.
They too high or too low?
They were too low.
Too low, yeah. And that, a white card, as close as you could get it to the shadow area where you're measuring without being in the picture.
Right. Yeah. But you also don't want to affect then the crayons or the ball.
Right. But if it's a small white card, like a 2x3,
right? Yeah.
What they recommend, they don't need a big reflector, just a small white card, just enough to bounce a little bit of light into that shadow area.
Yep.
And that's,
Yep.
That's what I do if I was doing natural light.
Yep. Well, she had other issues too. Her crayon wasn't, her black crayon wasn't out towards the edge. It was more towards the ball. It was the very first one towards the base of Sherman, and it was hidden. It was hidden behind something.
Hi, Deb.
Hi, Deb.
John.
Take that challenge.
Oh,
Yeah.
bye, Deb. I thought, see you Sunday.
It would make it a little more difficult to do.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, I've seen people having that black crayon in the middle or at the edge, and I always recommend that if they have to reshoot,
That's what I told her.
move it to the outer edge.
Yep. Make it the first crayon.
Make it the very first crayon.
One or two. First one or two.
But if it, if they do it and they have it in the middle and everything meets the specs, I tell them, leave it like it is.
See you, John.
I know.
No,
Thanks,
no,
James.
you're talking
Thank you.
about the crayon. I had a problem with my marker. My marker came like twice as wide as the one from the sample pictures, and so it's not round. It's kind of oval shape.
Yep.
Yeah.
So the clip to hang the marker was facing at the top, so it's creating extra shadow at the bottom. So it was a little bit hard to get that area properly lighted on the values because it's creating extra shadow on that clip. So I ended up flipping that clip towards the paper at the bottom, so I don't have to deal with that extra shadow. Because the sample image, since it's rounded, the clip was pointing towards the back, so it was not creating extra shadow from the top of that clip.
Right. And that's one of the things. What Blick is supposed to be sending everybody is that flat one like you got, but sometimes they don't have it. So an alternate one they can send is that round one that's in the example pictures.
Okay.
because there's 2 different Sharpies they can send. They're allowed to send 3 different shades of gray paper, 2 different size balls, either the 3-inch or the 4-inch. 4-inch preferred, 3 inches okay. And if for some reason they run out of Sherman dowels, they can send you his sister. They have a female dowel that they are authorized to send you.
Okay.
We'll set up a time, James, or Ramon. Sorry, James, Ramon. You know, I looked at James and saw Ramon. Said
Yeah, I
Ramon.
just came back. I've been sitting here. I just took off. I was eating up along with, I think, but everybody's out, so it doesn't matter now.
Yep. All righty, guys. Well,
Cool.
we'll see you guys.
That was a
soon.
long one.
What's that?
Thank you.
Yep. You guys.
I said that was a long one.
Yeah,
I'll see everybody.
We'll see everybody
Bye.
next week.